Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 150 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 6 of A Storm of Swords, that's Sansa 1.
And as always, for the 150th time, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll be particularly handy if you're not reading along with us. How are you, Mackelly?
I am doing just fine. 150 episodes.
I know. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like 148 episodes you've produced.
Hey, you did a good job last week. You covered all the bases.
It's ropey. When I'm doing it, it is ropey. I mean, I'm imagining it sort of like, what's the Greek mythology where they fly to Icarus?
Yes.
Yeah, flies too close to the sun. The podcast, when I produce it, is like his wings. It's just held together with wax and prayers.
Well, it's much appreciated that you handled it. You handled everything this past weekend because I was on the wagon train. I was leading my oxen on the wagon train from moving Ethan in, and I will say the wagon train did arrive safely in Charlotte, and we got them all moved in. It wasn't without mishaps, of course. Stacy bought him a bed frame. He took, he went shopping in our house, and he took the queen mattress out of our spare room, but not the frame, just the queen mattress. So Stacy bought him a new bed frame off Amazon, and the package came to our house like a day or two before we left, and it was a bit beleaguered. The box itself was it had tape in places it wasn't supposed to have tape, I'm pretty sure.
Like one of my podcasts, right?
Yes. But didn't bother opening it because we were about to transport it. So why would we do that? So we get it to his apartment, and I go into his bedroom to start setting it up, because that's kind of one of my handier things is putting stuff together. I'm pretty crafty at that. So I opened the box, which required much tape cutting. And it is a box of strewn things. It wasn't, back in the day, our bed frames were like two side things and then two middle pieces that came across and they latched in. That was it. It took 10 seconds to put together. But no, this is the kind that doesn't require a box spring. So it's got first of all, it's got 30 slats and slats going in all different directions and different size slats. And so there's no rhyme or reason. There's little screws just randomly strewn about the box, and pieces going this way and that way. Some are in the foam covers, and some are just not. And all that is disturbing and all, but the thing that made it worse is there was no instruction manual.
Oh, dear.
So I'm staring at it with my hands on my head what am I going to do?
The 5-piece metal frame. I need an instruction manual for that.
So I sat there for a while. Actually, we made an IKEA run. I was like, if I find a bed frame at IKEA that I like better, we're buying that one. But, we'd invested a not insignificant amount of money in this bed frame, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna figure this out. So I was like, how hard could it be? I'm just gonna start putting pieces together and see how it goes.
Yeah.
So I do.
It's like a jigsaw where all the pieces are the same.
Yes, exactly. So I start jigsawing it together, and I'm making progress. The biggest problem is there are A through F screws. The screws. Some of the screws. No idea
which ones to use.
Yes, and they're all labeled in these little packages that only have some of them, because some are just strewn about, but some are in packages labeled A through F, and I don't know which ones go where. So I'm just trying to use common sense. The long ones go through long halls, and
makes sense.
And I get to the part where I don't know if I was building it in the right order or not, but I get the whole bed frame built, and the headboard has 6 vertical slats.
Okay.
And I have 6 screws, all of different lengths. And I was like, I got 6 screws, I got 6 slats. We're making this work.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, either Ethan's bed was going to fall apart the minute he laid his little head down on it, or that thing is never moving.
Is actually screwed to the floor and the walls.
Yes. So that was one mishap. And the other noteworthy mishap is it was right before we were getting ready to leave. We went to lunch at this place, like right across the street from his apartment is this little diner. I've been to Charlotte like 5 times and I've eaten at that diner 3 times. So
okay.
Apparently it's the place to go. And we're just sitting there. It's, Ethan and Stacy's mother and I. And across the little alleyway, like across the booth on the other side there, just a few feet away, is another couple, probably in their early 60s or so, and they just randomly strike up a conversation with us. They seem like those kind of people that just wide open,
kind of like me,
just talking to anybody that'll listen. And so they just randomly strike up a conversation with us, and they're telling us that they were there for the Garth Brooks concert and yada yada, and their flight got canceled, so they had a day. And then their waitress comes over and looks at Stacy and Ethan and says, "You two resemble each other a lot. What's your relation?" And Stacy says, "Oh, I'm his mother." And the lady at the booth starts going crazy about, "What? Oh my gosh, we thought you were his sister. You don't look much older than a teenager," which, my beautiful, youthful wife, this happens to her regularly. She does not look old enough to have a 22-year-old son. So this is not out of the ordinary. It's kind of the usual reaction when she mentions that Ethan is her son. This part coming up, I will say, is not so usual.
Is unique.
Yes. The lady looks at Karen and I and says, "Those two are your parents. I know that for sure." To Stacy, insinuating that I am Stacy's father and my mother-in-law is my wife. Simon is speechless with his mouth hung open.
I cannot believe that.
Yeah, you and me both.
I am not going to criticize your wife in any way, shape, or form, but you and her look contemporaries. There's no doubt about it. Well, yeah. You have a youthful look too.
Well, I appreciate that.
That is crazy. That's madness. That reminds me of the Brian Regan bit that we like, where he asks the lady if she's pregnant, and, and halfway through he realizes he shouldn't be saying it and gets louder. "When's that baby due?"
Oh man, yeah, it's kind of how I felt. I kind of felt like
Ouch.
the not pregnant lady being asked if she's pregnant.
I'm sorry that happened, Mackelly. Oh well.
Well, I will say, Karen, my mother-in-law, that's quite the feather in her cap that she. We are 21
Damn
years
straight.
age difference. Oh man, I tell you.
All right. Oh, we did work together this week. It was very strange.
We did.
And what did you learn from working with me this week, Mackelly? What was the most important lesson?
Always listen to Simon. Is that the answer?
Exactly. I was hoping that's what you were going to say. Never trust anybody else. I know the true, and everybody else is wrong.
Do you know how much effort Jillian and I went through to get to where we were for you to say, "Oh, you could have just asked me. I knew this information all along."
Well, you know what? I think you needed to go through that pain to remember the important lesson.
Always
if you just come to me straight away, you would perhaps be like, "Any idiot can do this." But no, you come to me.
Jillian and I were talking about that the next day, and I was like, "Yeah, but the thing is, he ignores most of my messages because he assumes they're podcast related."
Touche. That is a problem. But honestly, I pay attention to Jillian, so just route it through her. Yeah,
right, good plan.
All right, we've got to get down to business. How did we leave Sansa Stark? Last we saw of Sansa, she was being both terrorised by and asked to flee with Sandor Clegane in her chambers during the Battle of the Blackwater, expecting Stannis' army to storm the city. Bringing with him rescue or more misery? Hard to know. Only to learn the next morning from Sir Dontus Hollard that the Lannisters had prevailed and she was basically back to square one. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
You know, this summary is quite special, is it not?
It's one of my favourite summaries ever.
This summary was handcrafted from the mind of our Buy Me a Coffee Royal Kingsguard member, Genevieve. And she added a comment that said, it was really fun and she really enjoyed this chapter. She thought the pace of the chapter was excellent and she can't wait to hear it read out. So,
well, there we go.
Very excited. Thank you very much for this, Genevieve. We're excited to read it.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Margaery Tyrell and gang has invited Sansa to dinner. Sansa's nervous. What could Marjorie's intentions be? Now that Margaery is to be queen, what could she possibly want with Sansa?
From her tower in Maegor's holdfast, Sansa remembers watching Margaery and her escort arrive at the castle, where King Joffrey very graciously met his queen-to-be at the King's Gate, and they entered the city to much fanfare.
Sansa's annoyed. The small folk cheering on Joffrey's procession were the same people who tried to kill the royal procession during the riot of King's Landing, right after Marcella Baratheon was seen off on her ship headed to Dorne via all of the known world. She remembers being pulled off her horse and would have died, or worse, if not for the hound.
I like the fact that Genevieve is actually including jokes from the podcast in the summary. Sansa's perplexed. Why is Margaery Tyrell so beloved by the small folk? Probably because Mace Tyrell brought a lot of food with him from the Reach. Sansa wonders if Joffrey is behind the invitation. Is this some kind of plot to further humiliate her? She thinks that only her Florian, the fool Sir Dontus, can save her now, although until the night of Joffrey's wedding, he's not much use to her.
Sansa flips back and forth on what Margaery's intentions are. Good? Bad? Good? All Sansa knows, which she learned from Cersei, is to never trust anyone. And yet, she can't refuse. How could she, as a hostage? She wishes the Hound were here to take her away. But eventually, Sansa accepts the dinner invitation.
The night of the dinner, Ser Loras Tyrell arrives to escort Sansa to Margaery. On the way to the dinner, Ser Loras tells Sansa that Lady Olenna, the matriarch of the family, will be there too. Sansa can hardly think, talk, and walk at the same time in the presence of the dashing Ser Loras. She calls Lady Olenna the Queen of Thorns, and Ser Loras tells her not to say that to Lady Olenna's face. They pass Sir Balon Swan on the way out of Maegor's holdfast, and she does not think him to be half as cute as Ser Loras.
In the practice yard, Sansa sees several knights and men practicing with swords and shields. She sees a Redwyne twin fighting Sir Talad, Sir Kenos of Casey with Sir Osney Kettleblack, and Sir Osfred Kettleblack with Morris Slint. Sir Garland Tyrell is fighting 3 men at once. Sansa tells Ser Loras that he is a great rider, having seen him ride in the hand's tourney against the mountain, along with several other men. She tells him that he gave her a red rose when he gave all the other ladies white roses.
He does not remember. She is crushed. Sansa tries to tell him that he gave her the red rose after he unhorsed Sir Robar Royce. Loras then says that he had to kill that man at Storm's End when King Renly died. He's sad now and stops talking to Sansa. They walk to dinner in silence.
They arrive at the Maidenvault where Lord Mace Tyrell's entourage are housed. They're guarded by Eric with an E and Eric with an A, also known as Left and Right to Olenna Tyrell. Margaery greets Sansa pleasantly. She's visibly happy that Sansa's here. Margaery introduces Sansa to all the women at the dinner table. Now, Genevieve had them listed here, but we'll go through them in the discussion here after the summary.
Yeah. Lady Olenna is tiny but fierce. She brings up Sansa's grandparents, Lord Rickard Stark, dead, and Lord Hoster Tully, dying. Olenna doesn't think King Renly was that great, and that Stannis had the better claim. She explains that the Tyrells got to their station because of ambition. Lord Mace Tyrell, a.k.a. Lord Pufffish, as Olenna dubs him, wants a grandson on the Iron Throne. Dinner starts and the Tyrells' favourite fool, Butterbumps, is summoned as entertainment. Can I mention just in passing on that last sentence that the first read through, I read fool as food. So it said dinner starts and the Tyrells' favourite food, Butterbumps. So I was like, what the heck is Butterbumps? I read this chapter, I don't remember them eating Butterbumps.
Sounds pretty good, though. The food is brought out, Lady Olenna orders cheese, and then drops the bomb on Sansa. Tell me the truth about Joffrey. Sansa freezes. She's afraid and doesn't know what to say. Lady Olenna presses, but gets the hint that Sansa's terrified. She tells Butterbumps to sing The Bear and the Maiden Fair as loudly as he can. The walls have ears, and the loud singing can drown out their voices.
Sansa reveals that Joffrey is, in fact, a monster. She immediately regrets it after seeing Lady Olenna and Margaery's reaction. She pleads with them to still go through with the wedding. Thankfully, nothing will change Lord Tyrell's mind. The wedding will go ahead. The ladies thank Sansa for her honesty.
Thankfully for Sansa, anyway.
Yeah.
Margaery asks if Sansa would like to visit Highgarden. The ladies intend for her to wed a Tyrell lad. A very excited Sansa thinks it's Loras they intend to wed her to. However, Lady Olenna sets her straight. It's Willis Tyrell, the heir to Highgarden. He's disabled, courtesy of Oberyn Martell, and near twice her age. They promise Sansa they'll take her to Highgarden once Margaery is wed. The song stops, the cheese arrives, and the conversation dies.
Yeah, so, great work, Genevieve. Thank you so much. It's nice to have a week off having to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
It was really good. It barely needed any editing from us, so thank you.
Yes, and she said it was a lot of fun, which was the whole point when we came up with this idea to offer this option is get involved with the show. You know, she really she said she really enjoyed it. So
and the referencing the jokes is really, I mean, that's what we like to do. You know,
right.
Hark back to previous jokes.
Yeah,
and it's a great chapter too. She's right to pick this one. It's first and foremost the introduction of Lady Olenna, who is just a terrific character. I mean, you get it in this chapter how she is just how the Queen of Thorns is a great name for her because she's so prickly and
right.
sort of and feisty.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Following closely on the heels of Tyrion 1, which is another really information-packed chapter. This chapter has so much going on in it, I'm afraid we won't cover all the details because there's just so many moving parts in this chapter, but we're going to do the best we can.
At some point, you need to read the book, really. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, we're here for you, but, you know, if you really want to enjoy everything of this, definitely read this one.
Right. But yeah,
so,
like you said, Olenna's great. I mean, she speaks her mind so freely when nearly everyone else does the King's Landing doublespeak that frustrated Ned so much. But she just tells what's on her mind. At least in this situation. Maybe she'd be a little bit...
Is this the first time that Margaery's been... Is this her first appearance in the books?
She was at Bitterbridge when Kat got there and met Renly. But she didn't have much of a role.
Yeah.
I think she might have said a sentence or two.
Yeah, you get a little bit of her character as well. I mean, obviously she's sort of a background character, really, to Lady Olenna, but you can hear from her sort of like a sharpness. She's not a dummy,
right?
And she's also very fond of Olenna. She, you know, but also sort of like scolds her for some of her excesses as well. So you get a little bit of Margaery from this. And to think, I mean, I think she's only 16, right, Margaery? So
yeah, I think you're right.
She's got a little bit of something, and in particular, to hear what she hears from Sansa in this, and to still be sort of like willing to go through with this, shows us kind of like a calculating maturity that Sansa is a long way from, I think. Jumping to the end of the chapter, of course.
Right. So, you know, the chapter starts with Sansa watching the procession come in, Margaery and Olenna and the rest of the Tyrell women and their handmaidens. And, you know, there's certainly some mixed feelings for Sansa. She on one hand, her hopeful salvation is arriving from, you know, relieving her hopefully from the cruelty of Joff. But on the other hand, she can't help but reflect on her own treatment from these same small folk and wondering why it couldn't have been that way for her.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is purely timing. I mean, it's nothing to do with the personality or the family name of Sansa and Margaery.
Right.
It's simply when they were there. I mean, Sansa was trotting through the starving city on her pretty horse, you know.
Right. Yes.
Margaery is coming when the battle's been won and food is flowing back into the city. You know, they're much more going to be receptive to the high and mighty when that's happening. So
Absolutely.
I think if Sansa were she would sort of reassure herself it's nothing personal.
Oh yes, right. Yeah, you're right. It comes down to positive public relations, bringing in all that food, which, in the name of Margaery Tyrell, nonetheless. And right. Sansa was here during the worst of times, and her father was dubbed a traitor and executed while she's been in the city. So,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Ned at that point, because obviously when the mob attacked Sansa and the royal party, it was just a mob, not really thinking about it. But I wonder if Mackelly's PR firm in King's Landing, if it were to do some market research, give these people a plate of food and ask them some questions, that they might actually have some sympathy for Sansa, because at that moment, at the moment when the riot happened, they were starving, and Ned's death was quite recent at that time. And I wonder if they're pointing the finger at the Lannisters and feel some sympathy for Sansa, saying things were better when we had Ned in charge. Now that King Joffrey's in charge, things are going to hell in a handbasket.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. That is, yeah.
I do think, actually, your PR campaign for PR is really our second Westerosi business opportunity.
It is. We have to diversify,
Exactly.
There's only so much brown clothes you can sell.
Haberdashery and PR consultancy.
Well, we see Sansa wise up from the time she arrived at King's Landing to now, because she's wondering what angle Margaery is playing with this dinner invitation, which is probably not something she would have thought of when she first arrived at King's Landing. And, she even has the thought, one thing she's learned about King's Landing and the court of Joffrey Baratheon is mistrust. That's not a direct quote, but it's something along those lines.
Yeah, I do wonder if this is really wisdom, or if it's simply she's now always afraid, and so just everything makes her afraid now.
Yes.
I mean, she's certainly right in saying the thing she's learned is mistrust, but you do notice by the end of this chapter, just because Lady Olenna and Margaery are nice to her, she spills the beans.
True. Yeah.
So that wisdom isn't sort of ingrained yet. If she can get over the sort of fear, then she's back to being a blabbermouth, and
it's a good, that's actually, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, she does just out with it, like she did when she outed Ned and his plan to get Sansa and Arya out of town.
Right. She wouldn't do that again.
Right.
She's learned that lesson. But again, an outsider comes in and treats her with kindness and respect, and she's just clinging to it like a drowning person,
Yeah, and, she went, one of the thoughts she had at this part in the chapter, when she was wondering what this dinner was all about, was, is this being set up by Joffrey? Am I about to be humiliated here? So that's quite a departure from that thought.
She had that fear going in, but then just decided it's not a trap. They're too nice.
Yes, right. And of course, we see by the end of the chapter that there clearly was an agenda. The agenda was to get information about Joffrey and to put this wedding to Willis Tyrell plan in motion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems that, so it's interesting that there's a skip generation here, because obviously Margaery's parents are missing. Mace Tyrell is clearly on the outs for Olenna. She doesn't trust him. She thinks he's an oaf.
And a puffish.
But a puffish, yes. But the wife, the mother of Margaery, is Allery. Is that right? Allery?
Yeah, that's how.
She's not involved in this, but she's present, but she's not involved in this conversation. So clearly they're sort of, these machinations are just the grandmother and grandchild.
Yeah, or else she is a significantly better spy than the other three, and she's like, watch, this is how it's done. I'm going to pretend I'm not paying any attention.
Right. the one thing that's just that conversation just triggered with me is what is the end game here for Olenna and Margaery? Because I mean, they were going to get one of two answers from Sansa. One was he's a monster. The other one was, you know what, he's all right. He's not so bad. He's kind of misunderstood.
Yeah.
But what was their end game? Because obviously, if it was the latter of those two things, they'd be delighted. They'd be like, oh, good, Margaery's marrying him. Given that it was the former, that's the worst possible news. It's like, this poor child is going to marry this monster, but they have no plan to change the plan. They're just going with it. So, I mean, is it just sort of forewarned is forearmed? I mean...
Right,
They may not realize how much of a monster he is.
Yeah, they handled that pretty well, didn't they? They were like, well, that's disappointing, but no worries, it's going to go on anyway. So, yeah, and then, Olenna, I did have discussion notes for this way later in the chapter, but we might as well get to it now while we're talking about it. Olenna says, oh, no worries, when Sansa says, please don't cancel the wedding, they'll know it was me, meaning the Lannisters will know it was her. And she says, oh, don't worry about it. Mace won't be persuaded out of this. This is going to happen. Right. And I thought, really? Like, he's just going to push his daughter into this situation? We don't know Mace. We've not met him yet, but...
Right, but Genevieve made the point in the chapter summary. His driving force is ambition, and he wants a grandchild on the Iron Throne. Yes. And so he's willing to sacrifice Margaery for that, clearly.
And also, that is very true, yes. But also, this is coming from what could be easily described as a spurned lover.
Right, but I mean, given how Sansa tries to not spill these beans...
Oh, yes.
When she does, you would tend to believe the later statements.
I agree, and I think Olenna and Margaery do, but I don't think the powers that be, like Mace, would enough in a retelling of the story to cause him to change plans.
Absolutely. But then it does beg the question: what were they hoping for? What were they hoping to get from this?
Right.
I mean, it just feels like, if I were Margaery now, I'd be going to sleep at night much the way Sansa Stark has been doing. Like, oh my god.
Right, yes. She weathers this like a champ. She's like, yeah, okay, well. Anyway.
So Sansa thinks about her last meeting with the Hound and how rumours now going around King's Landing that he turned craven. She knows, I mean, what does craven mean? Afraid and running away? Yeah, he did. But she actually knows what the source of it is. The burned face and the fear of fire and the fact that the whole battlefield was on fire. So she's at least a little bit understanding of his actions.
Yeah. I will say, though, that's a tough limitation for a warrior of this era. Because fire is pretty common in battles at the time. So, he's not all that useful in a battle.
I'm the greatest soldier in the land, but I am deathly afraid of horses.
I ride on an ostrich into battle. She actually wishes that the Hound were here. That's a thought that goes through her head. I wish the Hound were here. And she's been second guessing not taking him up on the offer of going with him when he fled the city.
For me, that second guessing would have started the next morning when Sir Dontus, the fool, came in and celebrated the fact she was still a Lannister captive.
Yes, that's true. She does keep she's kept his white cloak. The Hound's, not Dontus's. Right. She's kept the Hound's white cloak. And again, it just goes to that complex relationship between them. At times, he has been her top protector in King's Landing, but on the other hand, he's said awful things to her. Back when they met on that rooftop, at the tower rooftop, and he was watching the fires out in the distance, and he said some terrible things to her about Ned lying about not liking killing, and about Ned's body doing a dance after his head was severed, and he puts his sword to Sansa's neck and mentions that he enjoys killing women and children, and so is very complicated, their relationship.
Oh yeah. So on the walk to dinner, she walks with Ser Loras, and of course she is like heart in mouth walking with Ser Loras. And I actually think George Martin does a really good job of sort of like her internal thoughts as she tries to come up with topics of conversation to engage Ser Loras.
Oh my,
and
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a 12-year-old girl when I'm in a conversation with people. I'm often doing that same thing, especially people I like and admire, you know.
Yeah.
So he unfortunately has no memory of giving her the red rose at the tourney of the Hands tourney, which is such. I mean, that is a Valyrian steel dagger for Sansa, because for her it was kind of like the defining moment of her life to get that red rose from Ser Loras. But
yep,
a lot of things have passed under the bridge since then, so his memory of that might be somewhat hazy. But at the same time, it does sort of suggest that he was going through the motions. I mean, you give the red rose to the lady you find most attractive. If you don't find ladies attractive, it's perhaps less meaningful to you.
Right.
So.
Yes. All that I completely agree with. Yeah. It would be kind of like in today's more modern world, being escorted somewhere by your like number one celebrity crush, you know?
Yeah.
And trying to focus on having conversation with said person. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you could certainly understand why, even if he did find her the most beautiful woman in the world, a lot's happened to him. You know, he might not recall, that from way back then. Yeah, well, since that time, I've killed the man that I unhorsed before I gave you that rose. And, you know, Sansa mentions that he killed another member of Renly's Rainbow Guard, which was Emon Kai, or Cuyk Kai. So, you know, Loras isn't that so much that sweet summer night any longer. He's been in battle. He led the vanguard of his father's host in battle. He killed men, and Sansa notices there's a difference between him now and between him then. She thinks he's taller, but it could be that he's also more mature, more world weary.
Okay, can I just jump in here? Right. So Loras is 17?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
The time gap is only a few months between these things. Yes, a lot of things have happened. I am in my 50s, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but I don't have the best memory.
You know what? It might have come up a time or two. You probably don't recall.
Yeah. So, I remember every beautiful woman I've ever talked to.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Yes, I'm guilty of the same, probably. Yes.
So Loras, I don't care what he's done. He's done more eventful things than I've done in my life in those few months, but it's only been a few months, and if he liked the ladies, then he would remember giving the red rose to Sansa Stark.
Yes, you make a solid argument there. Yes, that's true. Now, I just remind everyone that he killed Robar and Aemon not in battle. He killed them when it was discovered, when he got to Renly's body, and those were two of the men that were guarding Renly. When it happened, he killed them out of a fit of rage, basically. And you remember Robar, he let Cat and Brienne go because he believed Cat's shadow assassin story. Aemon did try to fight Brienne and got knocked on the head by Cat with a pot or something like that. So,
but that's interesting. I was thrown there a little bit because of the contrast with the TV show. That was at Storm's End, right? In the book, it was Storm's End, but I think it was Bitterbridge in the TV show. Although I don't think Bitterbridge was ever mentioned, but I think that they hadn't got to Storm's End at that when all that happened. No, it must have done because they met Stannis. I mean, all of that happened because they parlayed with Stannis. Maybe I'm just confused. Anyway, so they see Loras's brother, Sir Garland Tyrell, fighting 3 men. So that's... I gotta say, it's not a bad idea. I mean, Loras mentions that when you're in battle, it's rarely just one. It's rarely mano a mano. You've got to have eyes in the back of your head, you know.
Right.
It's a battle. So
yes.
I understand the practicing with fighting 3. Gotta say, you'd imagine you get quite a few bruises during that practice because it can't be easy.
Oh, yes, that's quite the feat.
Unless you're like General Grievous with the swords, you know.
Yeah. You know, it makes you wonder, why is it? So Loras freely admits to Sansa that his brother Sir Garland is better with the sword than Loras is, and Loras is better with the lance. Now, I do think that jousting is like the number one thing you're most famous for in tournaments. But, you know, Garland doesn't seem to have the reputation that Loras has.
Yeah. And it does feel like he could enter melees. If this is how he practices, he'd be quite good in the melee. But you're right. It does feel like the one who wins the jousting has a higher reputation than the one who wins the melee.
Right. But we've seen 2 melees. We saw the one at Bitterbridge that ended with Ser Loras and Brienne being the final 2 combatants. There was either Garland didn't participate or he got knocked out earlier, and he didn't win the melee at the Hands Tourney. Thoros Amir did. Maybe he wasn't there. I don't recall whether Garland was there or not.
Yeah, but I don't think he was ever mentioned. Yeah, so
maybe he just doesn't like to participate in tourneys. I don't know.
Yeah. So Genevieve, we did, the only thing we edited from Genevieve's summary was the list of all of the ladies who were in attendance. They don't have a very active role in the book. I mean, basically the 3 of them, move aside and have this conversation without them. But they are so. Margaery's mother, Lady Allery, is Lord Tyrell's wife. She's the daughter of Lord Leighton Hightower. She's the 3rd oldest child, 2nd daughter. She's the older sister of Lyness Hightower, who is the lady who took Sir Jorah Mormont to perdition.
Right, yes, exactly. Sir Jorah's former wife, I guess.
Listeners, Mackelly is laughing because there was a lot of editing over Simon remembering things. I'm hoping, anyway. I'm hoping he doesn't keep it all in. You know?
It's quite funny. Then we have some cousins of Margaery's, Mega, Alla, and Eleanor, and they're all daughters of Tyrell men, cousins of Mace. So I guess they're maybe second cousins? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Lady Janna, who is Lord Tyrell's sister and therefore presumably Lady Olenna's daughter.
Right, yep. And then Lady Leonette, who is a Fossaway, she's married to Sir Garland, the knight we were just talking about.
A green apple Fossaway, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, good memory.
Look at me. Septa Nysterica, who's got a great name.
Yes, and then we have who's referred to as Lady Graceford, and she is pregnant, but I believe her first name is Alice Graceford.
Yeah. And then Lady Alisan Bulwer, who's 8 years old. Her connection is that her mother is Victoria Tyrell, who married a Bulwer.
Then we have Meredith, or as Sansa's supposed to call her, Mary Crane, and I'm not sure exactly what her connection is, other than that the Cranes are bannermen to the Tyrells.
Well, I mean, but the large families have ladies in waiting and sort of regular, hangers-on. Wouldn't be that surprising.
It's very possibly. There could be a little more than meets the eye here, because Parman Crane, Parman the Purple from Renly's Rainbow Guard, defected to Stannis after Renly's death. Ooh. And then he was sent to Bitterbridge as part of the party to collect the rest of Renly's army, which I think was a Davos 2 detail. Now, I don't think this is a spoiler, but in the Storm of Swords appendix, so this is freely available in the Storm of Swords appendix, Parman was arrested by Loras. Cooler heads prevailed. He was not killed like the other 2 members of the Rainbow Guard, and is currently imprisoned in Highgarden.
Huh?
So maybe Mary is in Margaery's entourage to keep the Cranes loyal going forward, a la the Red Wine twins in King's Landing. Or, like you said, maybe this has nothing to do with anything, and she's just a member of her entourage, a friend of Margaery's.
Yeah. Lady Taena Merryweather of Mere. She's married to Orton Merryweather.
And then, of course, the matriarch of the family, the Queen of Thorns, Lady Olenna, widow to the late Luther Tyrell, Lord of Highgarden. She was a Redwine before she married Luther, and she's the aunt of Paxter Redwine.
Okay, good to know. So yeah, as we said, Lady Olenna is just an awesome character. She's no nonsense. She's too old to care who she offends, and it's interesting you wrote in the notes here, she gets what she wants, but I'm not sure she does, because I think her son's driving force is ambition. He wants a grandchild on the Iron Throne. Her driving force here seems to be concern for her granddaughter. And she's not going to get what she wants. Right?
Yes. She got the cheese she wanted. Yes, you're absolutely right. In some ways, I guess she could be the matriarch, but still be overruled by her son. But, usually the patriarch or the matriarch is the one who runs the family. And in this case, she seems to have a lot of good ideas, or what she thinks are good ideas, that get overruled by her oaf son.
Yeah. I think it's more common when you've got a situation like that. I mean, Cersei and Joffrey is another example where you've got a widowed queen with, or lady with a son who's taken over, is that she has a lot of authority, but it can get trumped, it can be overruled by...
Right.
And I think that probably is going to happen to Cersei more and more. For instance, Ned Stark beheading.
Yeah, and speaking of Ned, we'd have a similar situation with Cat and King Robb.
Right. Although there, the matriarch got what she wanted in some ways.
That's true. Yeah, so Olenna sets some what appears to be early groundwork for trust with Sansa. She brings up her grandfathers. She mentions she knew she knew Lord Rickard before he died, and she knows Hoster Tully, and she expresses sympathies for all of her losses. Maybe just letting Sansa know, hey, I'm a person who's sympathizing with you. You can trust me.
Yeah. One thing, I know this is going to come up later on in our discussion, but it strikes me as odd that they left the carrot of, would you like to marry one of our sons and become the Lady of Highgarden, to the end of this conversation. Yeah. It feels like that might have been the way to Sansa's good graces. Yeah, sure, mentioning the grandparents, knowing her grandfathers is one thing, and having respect for them, that's one thing. But if you say, we have a way for you to get out of this mess, and it would lead to you being the lady of one of the biggest houses in the land, and having a very comfortable and enjoyable life.
Right.
Oh, and could you tell us what Joffrey's like?
Maybe it's just settled too much. That matter.
Right. Maybe it's just too much. Maybe they thought if we do that, it's going to look like we are laying it on too thick. Maybe we have to ask
bribing her or something.
Right. Yeah.
That's true.
But by contrast, Lady Olenna does not think very much of Renly. She says that he knew how to dress, smile, and bathe, but she says that his claim to the throne was nothing short of treason. And that's pretty bold words. And she's right, of course. I mean, there's no question about that. Renly was the one claimant to the throne who had no actual right to it.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, that whole, he knew how to dress, smile, and bathe, and somehow got the notion it made him fit to be king. That fits with the things we'd heard from Donald Noy and Maester Crescent. Donald Noy said something to John like, Renly was copper, pretty to look at, but not worth much in the end. And Crescent thinking to himself about like a little boy with black hair who was still playing games. Look at me, I'm king. Yeah. So, that fits. He wanted to be king, but he didn't have any claim to it, and he didn't necessarily know how to be king or build of the things that good kings are made from. Yeah.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
So, on the treason thing, I mean, Olenna says she wanted the Tyrells to have nothing to do with that situation, and she was overruled by her oaf son, Mace. And clearly, they've tipped the balance of power in this. I mean, the Battle of the Blackwater would have gone to Stannis were it not for the arrival of Tywin's army supplemented by the Tyrells. Right. Without that, I think, it certainly would have been a closer run thing.
Yes, absolutely. We don't know exactly what the breakdown, but we do know that the Reach and what was left of Renly's army was fairly sizable as far as the population of the army. And we also know that because of this Renly's ghost character, a lot of Renly's men who went to Stannis' side came back, which increased the size of their army. So, she says, once my oaf son put the crown on Renly's head, we were in the pudding up to our eyeballs or something like that. Right. I do wonder, though, when Renly died, they could have just washed their hands of it and say, yep, we're out. You guys finish it yourselves.
The problem there is that so you go back to Highgarden and you sit there and you farm your land and you count your money and you enjoy the sunshine. When the battle is over, whoever sits on the Iron Throne is going to be like, now, where were the Tyrells again? Oh, that's right. They supported Renly's claim.
That is a good point. They did take a side. And that whoever wins. Now, the Lannisters won, they might be more willing to forgive. I don't know that Stannis would be quite as forgiving, especially since his wife is a Florent, which we'll talk about in a bit what that means. But anyway.
Olenna points out how Joffrey calls himself a Baratheon, but he looks so Lannister, which goes to... She's obviously read Stannis' letter and has put some faith in it. Well, of course, I mean, to a certain extent, when the Tyrells agreed to Renly's claim, they were accepting the truth of that letter. Now they've flip-flopped, but
yes,
the thought must always be in the Lannisters' minds that these people, anyone who sided with any Baratheon, must have had some belief that the letters were true.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That adds up.
Anyone who was Renly and who came to Stannis could say, "We just didn't think you were going to cut it as king, Stannis. It's fine. We're sorry. And Stannis could turn a blind eye to that. But anyone who sided with either of the Baratheon boys believes or had believed that Joffrey Baratheon was not Robert Baratheon's son and was in fact Jaime Lannister's son, and that it's hard to come back from.
That is solid point. But you wonder, pulling all these pieces together, would Lady Olenna, have supported Stannis' claim to the throne above the others? Because she says Joffrey looks so Lannister, possibly meaning we believe this story that he is not Baratheon, and also says it was treason for Renly to claim the throne because he has an older brother, which makes you believe she might have backed Stannis had it not been for Mace over. Of course, she says she would have backed nobody, but if she had to back someone, it sounds like she might have backed Stannis.
Yeah, it definitely sounds that way. But then, of course, the interesting point came when Renly did die. They needed, like we just said, they couldn't just retreat to Highgarden because they were in it up to their eyeballs at this point. But they didn't go to Stannis, and I think if Olenna had been in charge, they would have gone to Stannis there. They probably would have been with Stannis to begin with. But Mace obviously went a different direction, And I wonder if that's purely out of fear of Stannis. Because Stannis had this reputation for being so unforgiving. And so to have sided against him and then to side with him, you might think this is never going to work because of Stannis' reputation for...
Yeah, that could be. He did pardon a surprising amount of people. At least
he did, but that was contrary to expectation, right?
Yes,
I mean,
right.
So by which point the Tyrells had made their this determination that they were going to switch sides completely.
Yes, solid point. So as I just mentioned, I mentioned that Stannis' wife Selyse is a Florent, and that could have been problematic for the Tyrells. And actually, Olenna references a little bit. She mentions that even the Tyrells' claim to Highgarden is a bit spotty. And we've mentioned in the past that the Florents were once much higher nobility than the Tyrells. And the Florents, backed King Meryn IV Gardener against Aegon the Conqueror. But after the Field of Fire, where Aegon and his sister wives just laid waste to everybody on their dragons, the Tyrells were up-jumped to Lord Paramounts of the Reach and given Highgarden, flipping over top of the Florents. So we had conjectured previously in Stannis chapters that maybe the Tyrells didn't back Stannis because there's too much Florent influence in Stannis's party.
But the thing is, of course, you're really going all in, because if you side with Stannis and he wins the Iron Throne, then it'd be hard for him to then take Highgarden from you.
True, yes.
But if you side against him and he wins the Iron Throne, then it's going to be very easy for him to reinstate the Florents as Lord Paramounts of the Reach.
You get a very solid point. Yes, I see where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
But Olenna also mentions that the realm is better off if all the kings put their swords down and listen to their mothers.
I think that's a universal truth.
Well, we know one king's been listening to his mother, King Robb Stark, first of his name. But, and until recently, he's been winning. So it's been working. But, now things have gotten a bit wobbly because he didn't listen to his mother and he sent Theon to Pike, which went very much against what Cat advised him to do. And it didn't work out. So the moral of that story is always listen to Simon and your mother.
So the Tyrell ladies tell Sansa that they'd heard some troubling tales about Joffrey, and of course Sansa hesitates at this point. But they've convinced her. They've won her over with their kindness and their lemon cakes, and she goes for it. Sansa mentions her. I think Olenna says that if she tells the truth, no harm will come. And she says, well, my father told the truth and he got beheaded for it.
Right.
So that's a reasonable riposte.
Yeah. And, Olenna, she responds that Ned did have that reputation for always telling the truth, but yet they named him a traitor and beheaded him. So once again, she's kind of coming to Sansa's side and saying, feeling sympathy for her, which probably helps Sansa make this decision to, I'm just going to spill the beans here. And it probably felt good, I'm sure, finally getting a chance to say these things that she's been thinking for so long and having to keep under lock and key. It had to, I'm sure it was terrifying on one hand, but on the other hand, felt probably quite good.
Yeah. So, she tells them of Joffrey offering the mercy to Ned and then beheading him and taking her to see the head on the spike for that extra thing. Having Lady killed, which they probably didn't even understand what she was talking about, but no. she was outpouring at this point. So, but the Kingsguard beatings, that's one that would resonate because none of the other things would feel like they really apply. I don't have a direwolf, probably not going to behead my father, but the Kingsguard's doing the beatings on his behalf. That's troubling for someone about to marry into the family.
Absolutely.
And then the big stretch, all of this is just cathartic outpouring but she says, And Cersei's just as bad. That's the one. We didn't actually ask about her, but thanks for that little tidbit.
Yeah, I will say it certainly felt good as a reader to finally see Joff and Cersei be outed to important, powerful allies here.
It'd be funny if, in the TV show if she starts and then it sort of like cuts away and then comes back and she's still going, with the list of crimes.
Right. Be like SpongeBob, like 2 hours later.
So, of course, all of this is terrible news for Sansa if this gets out. But, I mean, again, I always think that Sansa worries too much about what people think. I mean, when she's repeatedly told the Hound that she loves Joffrey and and it's like, he knows.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference. You might as well just tell him, And same here. I mean, yeah, the Lannisters will be annoyed she said it, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess so. I hope so. I'm sure she would face some sort of repercussion, though. I would think.
Right, just because they like repercussions against her.
Yes.
You ate lemon cakes.
So, Olenna starts it by saying something like, "We've heard rumors of Joffrey," and Littlefinger was the Lannister rep in the negotiations with the Tyrells. So was it him that spilled the beans on Joffrey and his behavior?
I love this idea. Now, I will say, on the one hand, I think you're really reaching, because how could they not hear rumors of Joffrey being a monster? Everybody knows. I mean, like, their servants would have interacted with Lannister servants, and somebody there is going to have said, stay away from him, he's horrible.
Yes, that's very possible.
But on the other hand, I love this thought that Baelish is out there planting more seeds of dissent within the big houses.
We certainly saw him pit Lannister and Stark against one another, right? With the dagger, the cat's paw dagger. Is he doing the same thing here?
Right, and if you think about it, you could argue that from his perspective, that has worked out perfectly.
Because yes.
He was on the small council, he was already fairly big, but now he's Lord of Harrenhal. Now, could he let the kingdom calm down and get back to sort of an equilibrium? Sure, he could. But you know what? The last time he created chaos, he elevated himself a huge leap. Who knows what he could do with the next round of chaos? So let's start planting those seeds too. Yeah, I mean, I love this idea. Yeah, I will say, though, it is very much conjecture. We talk about Littlefinger as if he is, the world's biggest planter of dissension seeds, but we don't know. He's almost never on screen. I mean, he's almost, he's not a POV character. Yep. And so a lot of it is just inference from the things that happen, like this. But again, there is a more benign explanation, which is they just heard it.
Yeah, that's very true. That is the benign option. There is their great house in the realm, and they've gotten the news that Joffrey's problematic, to put it mildly. And
also, I mean, the child of incest. I mean, I'm sure even in those days it was known that those could be. I mean, someone at least has said that the gods flip a coin when a Targaryen was born, and that's because of the incest. It wasn't because of the name, And if Joffrey is believed to be a child of incest, then the gods tossed a coin.
Yep. So once they get that unpleasantness out of the way and handle it surprisingly well, that's disappointing. Then they start the second half of the plot, which is the marriage between not Loras, that's what Sansa thinks it's going to be Loras, between Willis and Sansa. And Margaery starts it by painting this utopian picture of Highgarden that, as Sansa thinks in her head, it basically mirrors what she always dreamed King's Landing might be, what she had hoped that King's Landing might be, which couldn't have been further from the truth. And, this feels a bit like a sales pitch to get her on board. She, it wasn't that long ago that Margaery was a 12-year-old girl and probably knows the things that 12-year-old highborn girls, not including Arya, might think about, and just put it all out there, all the things.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem that contradictory to what we've heard about Highgarden. It feels like it is a pleasant climate, beautiful scenery, nice place to live. So
right,
I don't think I think she's polishing the apple, but I don't think she's lying.
Right, I agree. It would be quite a departure from her desire to get back home to Winterfell, but I don't know that we've actually seen or heard her thoughts that she knows Winterfell has fallen.
Right,
and,
right.
So we know that it has.
She knows with the war that it's not going to be easy, and sort of like she's getting to an age where a girl would get married, and a highborn girl would get married, and to land here, Highgarden as Lady of Highgarden would be a huge coup.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
If none of all this had happened, and the Tyrells wrote to the Starks and said, "Hey, do you want to marry your eldest daughter to our eldest son?" she probably would have been shipped off that day,
Yes, and that's what Ned told her when he said, "I'm sending you home," before she went and told Cersei what was happening. Is he said, "I'll find you a better match."
Yeah,
and this might have been one of the matches that he would have been looking for. Me, and now he is a little bit older than her, which I'll get to in a second. But could she be falling for the shiny object trap again? It happened the first time she was young and naive and fell in love with Joffrey before she finally got to know him because he was shiny and beautiful.
Yeah, but they gave her the blunt truth about Willis, that he is he's disabled. He has he fell from a horse, is it? Or a horse fell on him?
I think a horse fell on him as a squire.
Right.
And somehow Oberyn Martell is involved.
Right.
That's all we get is just that Oberyn Martell is involved, which does bring up a possible new point of contention because Tyrion offered a spot on the small council to a Martell. So they assume it's going to be Doran Martell who arrives, but either way, that could there might be bad blood between the Tyrells and the Martells over this situation.
Yeah. So I mean, we don't know Willis. We don't know what he's like. I mean, it could be that the injury has made him bookish and thoughtful and kind-hearted,
right?
Or it might have made him mean and angry.
Yeah, sure.
Certainly, it'd be a risk, but I mean, there's a lot of compensating factors to this. So, I mean, I think if I was Sansa, I would definitely gravitate towards this plan, regardless of the injury.
Yes, right. So there's 3 plans we've now heard of to extricate Sansa from this situation. It's the Dantas Hollard plan, the Hound offer, and now the Mary Willis Tyrell. Now, I will say they kind of gloss over this fact that the Willis is a bit old for you part. Now, I think Sansa's around 12. I mean, she could have had a birthday, but I believe she is 12. Willis is somewhere between age 23 and 26, according to a Wiki of Ice and Fire. So, like twice her age. It's not great for a 12-year-old and a 23-year-old or 26, but he's not. It's not like Liza
Arryn,
and John Arryn, yes.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah. So there's those 3 options, and of the 3. This one seems like it's put together by the most reputable, capable, competent of the options.
Yeah.
And it ends with her being the Lady of Highgarden, which is not something to shake a stick at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do wonder about the strategic aspect of it, though, because it is interesting, because obviously the Lannisters are very much at war with the Starks right now. And for the Tyrells to invite a Stark into their home, is that a poke in the eye to the Lannisters? Is it to try to sort of strong-arm the Lannisters into making peace with the Starks?
Right. Yes. It even made me wonder, could this have been the letter? You remember when Tyrion came and visited Tywin, he mentioned he was writing important letters, and he said some wars are won with sword and shield, and some are won with pen and raven or whatever, pen and paper or something like that. Could they have been working on this as a means? You marry Sansa to Loras Tyrell, and then you tell Robb, Sansa, your sister, is now married into the Tyrell family. The Tyrell family is now married into the Lannister family. Let's put all this fighting aside.
The thing is, though, that doesn't feel very Lannister. I mean,
it doesn't.
There's the tale of the Rains of Castamere, who crossed the Lannisters at some point. I don't know if this is a spoiler, if this comes up later, but it happened in the past.
Yes.
It happened in the past, so I think we can talk about it. They were destroyed root and branch. I mean, they were obliterated off the face of the earth. It feels like, I don't even remember what the Rains did, but the Starks have done more. And for them to bury the hatchet this way would be sort of a contrary to the Lannisters. So I wonder if it's the Tyrells trying to say, hey, the Starks are a noble house. They need to be preserved. They can't be ended by this. Maybe we ask them to bend the knee, but one way to make the Starks seem indispensable is to make their daughter the Lady of Highgarden, because then if you destroy the Starks, you'd have to turn on the Tyrells to destroy this Stark,
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, because it's a logical question, because what do the Tyrells get out of this marriage otherwise? Why are they going through it? Are they just feeling pity on Sansa, or altruistic? Oh, I know, we can help her by marrying her off to Willis. Or is there more to be gained from this?
Yeah. I mean, it does remove this, it does remove from King's Landing this former betrothal of the king.
Right.
So just to, maybe sort of like turn a new page. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is what we were talking about with the Florence claim to Highgarden. This is a bid for continuity in the realm. The Starks have the North. The Tyrells have Highgarden. The Lannisters, the Baratheons have the Iron Throne. That works for the Tyrells because turmoil in the realm puts that question of, hey, maybe the Florence could get Highgarden back on the table, sort of.
Good point. Yeah.
Maintaining the big houses in their ancestral homes feels like something they would care about.
Yep, that makes sense.
Background? Do you have some background for us?
You know what? You know how a lot of times I say it was really tough to find background in a chapter?
There's like 6 chapters worth here.
Yes. There is enough. Honestly, there's enough to do an entire background episode out of the things that came out of Olenna Tyrell's mouth and the thoughts of Sansa. But because background gets tougher the further we get into the story, I kind of had to be choosy. So my original plan was to do a background on the Maidenvault, which is where this scene is held. It's where the Tyrells are staying. But there's time for that later. So instead, I'm focusing on something that Olenna mentioned about her past. She mentioned that they tried to marry me to a Targaryen once, but I soon put an end to that. Which is quite an interesting statement to make, I thought. So what's the deal with that, right? Well, I'm going to tell you. So Olenna and Prince Daeron Targaryen, the third son of Aegon V, because there's like a million Daeron Targaryens, they were betrothed.
There's a few Aegons too.
When they were both 9 years old in 237 AC, which, if my rough math, makes her around 71, I believe. Olenna claims that she soon put an end to the betrothal. But according to the records at the Citadel, it was Daeron who broke it off. And it wasn't too soon either. She said, I soon put an end to that. The couple was 18 years old when Daeron followed the lead of his older siblings who had also broken off arranged marriages. So that was 9 years of betrothal. Not exactly soon, in my book anyway. However, whereas Daeron's siblings ended their marriage pacts to marry for love, Daeron did not. Instead, he preferred spending his time with his friend Sir Jeremy Norridge, whom he met as a squire at Highgarden. Now, Daeron and Jeremy died side by side when Daeron led an army to squash a rebellion led by 3 men known as the Rat, the Hawk, and the Pig. Aside from inciting a rebellion, the men were also known to have attacked Elora Targaryen at a ball, leading to her taking her life not too long afterward. Now, just a few quick hitters, because there were other things that we've talked about in the past that I couldn't do a full background on. But before I get to those, she also referenced Baratheons having, in her words, queer notions. And I believe she's referring to another Baratheon rebellion against a Targaryen king on the Iron Throne, aside from Robert's Rebellion. We'll surely get to that story, but we must pace ourselves. So some of the other things she mentioned Aerion Brightflame basically as a comely monster. And he is the older brother of Egg, King Aegon V. So uncle here to Daeron Targaryen. We've talked about this. He died drinking a cup of wildfire, believing it would transform him into a dragon. He was also the one that had the misguided decision to name his son Maegor, which is not a popular name in the Targaryen book of record. We also meet 2 guards named Eric with an E and Eric with an A, and they're identical twins, and Olenna can't tell them apart and calls them left and right. And if those names sound familiar, it's because we once did a background on 2 identical twin brothers of the same name with the last name Cargill. Now, those 2 were members of the Kingsguard during the reign of King Viserys I Targaryen, and they ended up on opposite sides of the Dance of the Dragons, and they killed each other in a fight to the death. And then the last bit of background that I'll mention is Garth Greenhand gets a mention when Sansa says the Tyrells can trace their line all the way back to Garth Greenhand. He is a mythical high king from the Age of Heroes. Some think he was a contemporary of Bran the Builder. There's plenty to talk about with him, so we're not going to get into the details, but that's who she's referring to.
All right, future background, good. Comparison with the television show, all of this is very much captured. Rather than receiving an invite to brood over, which was what Sansa does at the start of this chapter, the precursor on the TV show is a scene with Shae, who you'll recall in the TV is acting as her handmaiden, in which Shae asks Sansa to be very wary of Littlefinger. There'd been a previous scene with Sansa talking to Littlefinger, and to report any advances that he makes towards Sansa to Shae. Sansa is immediately suspicious, like, why is my handmaiden quizzing me about this sort of thing?
Right.
But she asks why, and Shae says, because I will make him stop. So, you know.
Oh. Okay.
Loras arrived. Sansa's heart skips a beat. Shae gives her a look which goes along the lines of, this girl has got a lot to learn. Like, you know, Loras arrives, brain switches off. They walk to meet the rest of the Tyrells. Sansa is not quite so tongue-tied in the TV show. Loras doesn't immediately recall the favour at the Hands Tourney, but upon prompting, he does seem to recall it. Sansa's definitely a bit more relaxed in the show. The conversation with Olenna, played by Diana Rigg, who is absolutely masterful in this role, is just about verbatim. It's outdoors in the daytime, so that's one thing that's different. It's not dinner, it's sort of like a picnic in the daytime.
Okay.
So because of that, there's no need for butter bumps. They just send the prying ears away, and they're just very isolated, the 3 of them, so they can talk openly. The one omission is that there's no offer of a marriage for Sansa. This is all about Joffrey, this conversation.
Oh.
But Olenna's views of Mace Tyrell and Renly and all of this are very much laid out as they were in the book.
All right, good stuff.
I did read one interesting thing about Diana Rigg, actually, that she never watched the show.
She didn't watch her own work.
No, but
when you're as successful as she is, you know.
she loved it. Apparently, she loved the lines she got, and she thought her character was fantastic, and she just loved doing it. But she didn't bother watching the show.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Pedantry Corner. Do you have anything?
I do not. Is that your thing in there? Or is that a holdover?
I think that's left over from last time. Yeah. No pedantry here. It was just too good to have pedantry.
That's right.
News and notes.
News and notes. First thing I wanted to mention is I was listening to last week's episode and I noticed that I referred to Axel Florent as Stannis' Hand of the King. I meant to say Castellan of Dragonstone. My apologies for that.
I can't catch them all, Mackelly.
Another thing that I actually just read about this morning is the dagger. So there's a new House of the Dragon teaser out, and there's House of the Dragon news everywhere right now because we're getting very close to the launch of the show. And there's a dagger that Alicent Hightower has in her hand in one of the scenes. And it is indeed the same cat's paw dagger used in Bran's murder attempt. We were initially told in an interview that it's not, but that was a miscommunication because story-wise, it's the same dagger. It's just
it
not
just wasn't the same prop. Right, I see, yeah.
So
George Martin cancelled an appearance at the San Diego Comic-Con this week due to surging COVID-19 rates. Good. Thank you, George. Look after yourself. We want you here for the long haul.
Yes. And that's going on this week, I believe. This weekend it's happening. So by the time everyone hears this, it'll have been too late anyway. But
I used to live in San Diego, and it was always a big deal when Comic-Con was on.
I'm sure it was, yeah. Anyway, we've got our live video chat with our Royal Kingsguard members in our Lords Paramount coming up on Saturday, July 30th, which, if you're listening when this episode comes out, that's this weekend. So that'll be, did I say at noon, Eastern Daylight Time, the U.S. Canada time? Okay, good.
And once again, thank you to Genevieve for the great summary. And if any other members of the Lords Paramount or Royal King Guards want to join in the fun, reach out to us. Or you can join the Lord Paramount tier and take advantage of the opportunity to get involved in the show.
Yes, we'd very much appreciate that, and we'd have a lot of fun.
Let us draw a conclusion to this monster. Sansa is missing the Hound and second-guessing whether she should have gone with him. But I think by the end of this chapter, she's probably relieved, actually.
Yes.
Marrying Willis Tyrell or going off into the wild with the Hound. I'll marry Willis on this one.
Yes. She probably is like, yeah, I made the right decision. Decision. Feeling pretty good about it now. Yeah, like I mentioned, she's got multiple options here. This one seems like the most up and up. The Dantas option, that's...
everybody gets drunk at a wedding, and Sedontus is way ahead of everybody already. So.
But now she's off to a new betrothal, so yet again, no control over herself or who she's marrying. But, there's the downside, but there's also upsides.
Yeah. On paper, Willis seems like a good guy. His family speak highly of him, but then Joffrey's family spoke highly of him. Or at least some members of Joffrey's family spoke highly of him. If you found the right one, you would get the truth.
Probably, yes. Tyrion might not speak quite so highly.
Exactly. Tyrion was the one to talk to. Or Renly. I know Renly wasn't actually a member of his family. Well, I suppose Renly was purportedly a member of his family, but...
Right, yes. Not a big fan of his nephew. Yeah. But then, it just begs the question, why are the Tyrells doing this?
Yeah.
Pity, opportunity to marry into the Starks, and the war, all things that we discussed.
Yeah. Olenna's a great new character. It's refreshing to have someone who speaks their mind. I guess when you're 71 in this era, you are past caring.
Yes. It's probably a freeing point to reach.
Yeah.
And what certainly can't be overlooked in this chapter is Sansa totally lets loose on Joff, spilling all the beans. Surely that had to feel good. Was it smart? Was it safe? That's more debatable.
Yeah, and will Varys get wind of this? I mean, he has a remarkable way of getting information, but a Bumps was singing loudly, so maybe nobody heard this.
Hopefully. Unless Butterbumps is the spy.
Is the spy. You do well to sing loudly and spy on someone at the same time.
True, yeah.
But hey, he could pull live chickens out of his mouth. Who knows what he's capable of?
And like we've mentioned multiple times, they took the news of Joffrey's character pretty well, considering the impending wedding.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing that they already believed it, and they were just looking for verification. They weren't they weren't scared to hear it. They already believed it. They just wanted someone with, you know, an independent person to give them the true. And it was like, okay, that's what we feared.
Yeah. That very well could be the case.
Yeah.
But, you know, then I wondered, what's Brienne going to do when she gets to King's Landing and finds 0 Stark girls?
Drag Jaime off after to Highgarden. You're coming with me. Okay. There are 3 ways that you can help us. You can leave us a positive review. We'd appreciate that. You can buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. Or you can buy us an Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Or become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level. Any of that would be greatly appreciated.
Certainly would. And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can go out and follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.